Hi, my name's Craig West. I'm the CEO and founder of Succession Plus. We are the largest business succession and exit planning advisory firm in Australia. We've been working with business owners in the mid-market to help them maximise business value and achieve a successful exit for over 15 years. During that time, we've learned a lot, we've seen a lot, and hopefully we can share with you some of our experience, some of our knowledge, and the intellectual property we use to help business owners work through what is probably the most important focus area for an owner to work on. How do I maximize the value of my business and achieve a successful exit? Hopefully this webinar helps you understand some of those key issues you should be thinking about as an owner and helping you maximize the value of your business and achieve a successful exit. In this session, we're going to talk about the role of employee ownership and specifically employee ownership trusts as a succession tool. A large part of my doctoral thesis was on looking at the key drivers of exit and how employee ownership might be utilized as a succession tool. So the key thing here is to understand what is this employee ownership trust that we're talking about and how is it now a new model for ownership and succession. An employee ownership trust, or an EOT, is simply a trust structure that holds an interest in a company or a business asset on behalf of its employees. Trusts have been around for a very long time. In fact, they go right back to the Middle Ages, where knights that went on the Crusades, in those days, females were not allowed to own property. And so the simple plan was a knight went away on a crusade. Because their spouse, their wife, was not able to own the property, they would leave their castle or their estate or their farm in trust with their next door neighbour, another knight, to look after that property in trust for the benefit of the wife and kids. Now, that's an oversimplified explanation. Trusts haven't changed. That's exactly what they are. There is a trustee, the other knight, looking after the asset, the farm, the castle, for the benefit of the beneficiaries, and they are the family members. There is a trust that looks after a particular asset, in this case, shares in the business or ownership of the company, for the benefit of the key employees. The ownership is held collectively by the trust. The individual employees don't own shares. They have a right to the equity in the trust. In our peak performance trust, which is a type of employee ownership trust, that's through units in a unit trust. These originated in the UK, employee ownership trusts. They're now being used in Australia much more popularly. And in fact, we're managing over 180 of these plans just through Succession Plus. They're becoming far more popular. They're a mechanism for values-based exits or legacy stewardship exits and much broader employee engagement. The business, as a result, becomes employee-owned without actually each employee needing to buy shares directly. And there's a couple of ways to do this. Certainly, you can use different employee ownership structures. We've spoken previously about employee share ownership plans, employee share schemes, startup plans, performance rights plans. We've also talked in detail about our peak performance trust model. They're all different types of plans. They've all got different benefits and they're right for the right reasons for different owners and for different businesses. Certainly what we're talking about here is an overall model called an ownership trust, where the equity and ownership is held by the trust. It's indirect. The employees, typically a large number or a broad base of employees, are involved in these plans. These plans are often simpler and they have a centralized structure, making them easier to understand and implement for employees. You can structure these plans to either gradually buy the shares over time or provide an upfront payment to the founder or vendor that's exiting the business. And often what we have here is both a legacy stewardship focus, a cultural impact because our employees are involved, and also preserving the founder's goals and outcomes around the business and what they're looking at doing. It's not just about financial upside, it's all about collective benefit and long-term thinking. But don't get me wrong, there is a financial benefit. A lot of the academic research talks about the increased wealth and financial benefit to employees that participate in these particular plans. Now, certainly, in terms of how the plans work and how they're governed, our Peak Performance Trust is probably the best example of an Australian model for the equivalent in the UK. In the UK, legislation was introduced in 2014 to bring in these employee ownership trusts. There is no specific legislation in Australia to cover employee share ownership plans. There are tax incentives in the UK, but also we use the existing tax concessions for employee share plans under what's called Division 83A here in Australia to provide some of the same sorts of benefits to employees and founders looking at exiting. There is a legal framework. So whilst in the UK, you have to have a corporate trustee, there has to be employee input and so on. That's not necessarily the case here in Australia, but there is a legal framework that must align with both the Corporations Act and the Taxation Act. And certainly there's now interest growing in policy support for a broader rollout of these types of plans as they become more popular here in Australia. There are some benefits, and they're not just financial, they're not just tax related. They are looking at a succession strategy that is a win-win-win scenario. So in other words, the business should be better off, the founder should be better off, and the employees should be better off. It benefits all stakeholders, not just the exiting founder. It is about ownership that's built to last. So we get cultural continuity. Business values, legacy, and culture are preserved. The employees are involved and engaged. They've got a stake. They have a win-win scenario. They have a financial investment in the performance of the business. The owner or founder can exit on their terms. It's legacy, but it also has a financial output. And so it's a unique combination of financial harvest and legacy stewardship exit. There is stability because we're not actually changing. We're not bringing in an external buyer or a PE firm or somebody else who's going to disrupt the day-to-day operations. The buyer's already within the business. The ownership group becomes the employees. They're already there. They know how it works. And so there are several opportunities to use these types of vehicles to transition a succession strategy that can work quite successfully. In terms of how we do it, there's a separate session specifically on implementing an employee share ownership plan, but these plans are meant to be simple, efficient, and effective, and therefore affordable and manageable for most SMEs to introduce. It doesn't have to be overly expensive. It doesn't have to be overly burdensome in terms of time and effort involved from the owners or other advisors. It should be obtainable for most small to medium enterprises as a valid succession strategy. We do need to think about some of the key parameters and how we design the plan and the structure and the rules, because proper design does make sure that the EOT is commercially, financially, culturally successful and sustainable for all that are involved. Thanks for joining me for that session. I hope you found it really interesting and informative and hopefully helpful for you in your business. If you want to find out more, there's a stack of resources available on our website that includes white papers, ebooks, and other webinars like the one you've just seen. Also, feel free to reach out. I've got a team of advisors who are experts in the various areas of business succession and exit planning. They're here to help you. Feel free to reach out, touch base with one of my team. I'm looking forward to being able to help you maximize the value of your business and achieve a successful exit.